Zach, wow. I'm in shock like a weasel in an electric chair. He just made me realize that I must be getting old.
Deadly Premonition is one of the best examples of a game's sum being greater than its parts. A game that came close to cancellation a handful of times during a long, troubled development. Its gameplay is nothing to write home about, but it's the world of Deadly Premonition that's made it such a beloved title. On the surface level, it takes heavy influence from Twin Peaks, but it's more than a simple clone. Within is a story in town that stands on its own merits. It's one of the most memorable, realized cast of characters in gaming. Rounding that out is one of the most lovable gaming protagonists in recent memory.
Zach, I haven't been on stage like this since elementary school. I'm not some tree in the wind this time either. And that was a tough role. I was a piece of scenery. Bright red tree.
It's silly and at points nonsensical, but it's earnest and full of love that few games can match with its setting. Deadly Premonition has a reputation for being one of the best bad games, or the game equivalent of The Room. Something that's never sat right with me. The Room is a case of a snake eating its own tail, where its bizarre and nonsensical nature is brilliant in all the wrong ways. There's a method to the madness of Deadly Premonition. There's a lot of love and care put into it by its director, Swery65, and the development team. There's too much going on here to think it's a happy accident the way Deadly Premonition comes together. And I think that reputation hindered Deadly Premonition 2, a sequel that at many points feels like it doesn't understand why the original was so beloved. I give them props for taking the risk of leaving the setting of the original. That said, the town of Lucare lacks compelling characters with a few exceptions. Most come across as one note compared to the original. Don't get me wrong, there are moments of brilliance in Deadly Premonition 2, but the game sure makes you work for it. Deadly Premonition's gameplay was nothing to write home about, but the sequel at points is insufferable. It's full of fetch quests and padding that even the developer at Ubisoft would think is overkill. As a result, it loses the stellar pacing of the original. The narrative at points grinds to a halt, then rushes to its conclusion. Deadly Premonition 2 is a title that needed more time in the kitchen. Sure, you could say that about most games, but Deadly Premonition 2 is an especially notable example. With that, let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the York of Deadly Premonition series. Isn't that right, Zach?
Did you see that, Zach? Clear as a crisp spring morning. F.K. in the coffee. I knew I could count on it. Never fails.
For this video, I'm playing the Director's Cut PlayStation 3 version using an emulator. Why not the PC version? Despite many attempts, it would always crash to desktop. I tried several guides and fan patches, same result. I did get the PC version to work several years back, but nothing worked on my current setup. Even then, there were odd quirks with emulating the PlayStation 3 version. Newer builds of RPCS3 introduced shadow flickering, so I played with an older build for most of the game. Near the end stretch, the game started to give me a black screen. Many attempts to fix that failed, so I updated to the latest build. This worked, although now I had to deal with flickering shadows. I did manage to make it through to the end, thank God. In a way, this adds to the broken, goofy charm of Deadly Premonition. One of the main differences with the director's cut begins with the first scene. Our protagonist, Francis York Morgan, is telling a story to his granddaughter. The story he tells are the events of Deadly Premonition.
If you don't want to hear it, I can tell you a different story.
No, I want to hear it. This way, I won't be scared.
Will you turn on the TV then? Leave the sound down like always.
We're in this odd red room in a forest, with a couple twin boys dressed as angels. This is a room we'll come back to throughout Deadly Premonition. You can feel the Twin Peaks influence right away, especially with the music track.
Sorry to keep you waiting. It will start soon.
It's about time to get started.
We're back in the FBI days of Francis York Morgan, or York as he likes to go by.
FBI Special Agent, Francis York Morgan. Please, just call me York. That's what everyone calls me.
He's off to investigate a murder in the town of Greenvale, a small town in Washington state near the Canadian border, although his focus is elsewhere on his way in.
Listen, they both need each other. It's called interdependency, and they both know it. Yeah, I know. He does terrible things to Tom. Nasty, even sadistic things. But that's fine, as long as that's what Tom wants. Think about it. his actions. He's always asking for it. It's his partner's job to fulfill that need, and Jerry knows that. Proof? Well, in the Tom and Jerry show, they live with each other.
York swears to avoid a figure on the road and crashes his car. Here we get our first stretch of gameplay. We're introduced to the Otherworld sections and the enemies we'll come across during them. We'll come back to these sections in a bit. I do go back and forth if they should have had this Otherworld section at the start of the game. While these sections are great for building an uneasy atmosphere, they're some of the game's weakest moments. But I do understand the reasoning for it. Otherwise, you'd have a long stretch of dialogue before the gameplay begins. That said, it's not a long section before things shift back to normal and York comes strolling into town. We'll meet two key characters here. Emily and George of the Sheriff's Department, characters that York will be working and spending a good deal of time with. At the hotel the next morning, we have one of the game's most notable scenes. The one that lets you know what you're in for. York is eating breakfast with its owner Polly. There are no other guests at the hotel. We're eating at a long table when there's no need to.
Polly, it might help to hear you better if you could sit a little closer.
Oh my, Mr. Morgan, you're embarrassing me. So early in the day, too. I think I'm a little too old for you.
Out of everything going on here, the music is most notable, especially once the kazoos kick in.
Large table and cafeteria. We have to make use of all this space. Now tell me, that wound on your face, what happened?
Let's just say I had some trouble during the last case I was working on. I'm sure it'll heal. It's just a flesh wound.
If you're not on board after this scene, Deadly Premonition isn't for you. But if you are, full speed ahead. Deadly Premonition has one of the most fascinating, memorable soundtracks around. One that's quite versatile in its tracks. You have tracks that wouldn't sound out of place if featured in Twin Peaks. I have to give special props to the saxophonists going for it here.
Now, I first thought death by suffocation, due to the marks on her neck. But after further investigation, I now have a different conclusion. The direct cause of death was loss of blood from the wound.
Then you have tracks that wouldn't sound out of place in a mid-90s film starring Pauly Shore. Then you have tracks with questionable mixing, overpowering the conversations.
Find out why the town is soiled. Remove the source from which it boiled. Then and only then, your case is solved. But for this to happen, to solve the crime, the proper must do the proper at the proper time.
Deadly Premonition loves to switch up tracks on the regular and conversations. There's about a handful of tracks it likes to cycle through. Some of the game's funniest moments arise from these shift in music tracks. A dark, serious scene can switch to a more light-hearted scene with a switch of music, one that causes tonal whiplash at points. But unlike a Bethesda game, all of this just works. That said, the game knows when to keep things serious, but also knows when to lighten things up. Few games have as memorable characters as Deadly Premonition. It's one of my favorite casts of characters in the game. At the center of it all is our main character, Francis York Morgan, an FBI agent coming to investigate a murder in Greenvale, Washington.
There's definitely something in this town. Do you feel it, Zach? My coffee warned me about it. Yesterday morning, the milk I poured in my coffee made a sign. It said, "Tomorrow you'll arrive in a place that will change your fate."
Very much inspired by Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks, but not a carbon copy. He has his quirks, flaws, and strengths. He's a bit aloof and isn't the great at reading the room.
The case I was on until last month, well, the guy killed 7 girls in a 3-month period. He sawed their heads off from the neck and took them back to his house. He cleaned the skulls up and used them as utensils in his daily life, to eat from or as a urine cup. He hated women. That was his way of dealing with it. He'd fill skulls with ice, cola, and rum, then he'd down it in one gulp. For him, that was a holy ritual. The question of his mental state was the pivotal point in the court case.
Oh, man.
For me, he was insane. 100%. Drinking from the skulls. Well, that is one thing, but those he had used to relieve himself, he would then just use them to drink from, too. Yeah, that was too much for me. It's just not sanitary.
At times, a city boy that could look down on small town folk. But throughout the game, his view changes to Greenvale and those around him. He has a fondness for coffee and food. He loves to tap his chest during conversation. And he loves his movies. Very much an aficionado. It's something that comes up here and there in conversation with others.
What movie was it?
An American Werewolf in London.
Directed by John Landis, 1981. So the rain stopped, accompanied by the ending song, Blue Moon.
But when he's alone with Zach, that's where he goes deep into his love of films.
She's in one of my most favorite movies. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, 1986, directed by John Hughes. Oh, that one was so 80s. Zach, you're not the most cheerful guy I know, but you really do like those cheerful movies. We used to love those teenage movies back then, didn't we? Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink, St. Elmo's Fire, and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. That last one was in 1982, directed by Amy Heckerling. 1975, directed by Steven Spielberg himself, the grandfather of panic movies, set in a small town in Massachusetts. That movie made me stay away from the beach for years. I was always afraid that a hand might come floating up. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah? It's Jaws. The underwater camera work, accompanied by that John Williams music. I'd never been that scared by a movie before.
Who is Zach? An unseen figure that York is talking to on the regular. Is he in his head? Another personality?
Zach, let me smoke one first. I need to clear my head so I can take everything in.
The reveal of who Zach is comes later in the game. In a way, he serves as a narrative device. You can view Zach as you, the player. York is talking to us on the regular. It's an interesting way of giving our protagonist a way to talk to himself on the regular. Far better than the talk to themselves to guide the player we see in most modern large budget titles. Although York's talks with Zach are less about guiding the player and more about fleshing out his character. This all adds up to one of the more memorable protagonists around. Of course, he has plenty of great characters to bounce off of. While we'll spend plenty of time with the residents of Greenvale, some get more screen time than others along the critical path. One group that gets plenty of screen time is the local law enforcement, starting with George Woodman, the town sheriff. A bit hard-nosed and clashes with York on the regular, at least at first. Throughout the game, York refers to him as the Monarch.
You just think of this as a vacation. Take it easy. Enjoy the nature here. You don't have to be a tree worshiper to appreciate the wildlife here.
Zach, let's reassess the situation. There are no cavemen here. We're as far forward as the Middle Ages. And we've just met the king.
York tells everyone to call him York. For a good stretch of the game, George calls him Agent Morgan. There's a lot of weight to that moment when George finally calls him York. Speaking of weight, George loves to exercise, with his weights Arnold and Sylvester.
George, I found Arnold.
Really?
He was a bit hard-headed, but I got him to come back.
Huh? Oh. Arnold. Well done, Agent Morgan. Now I can work out using my normal workout menu.
Good to hear that.
He had a difficult childhood, which plays a factor in how the plot unfolds and is taking care of his sick mother. Emily Wide is the deputy sheriff. She came to Greenvale in high school from Seattle. A kind individual and a budding romance with York that takes its time in playing out. At first, they could be at odds with one another, but that changes throughout the game. Her cooking skills need some work.
Enough. But how did you know the cheese was the answer?
I was looking at the ingredients, and it hit me. Milk, macaroni, flour, butter. You were trying to make macaroni and cheese, right?
Macaroni and cheese? Of course not. It's Italian beef stew.
Zach, have you ever heard of a beef stew with no beef in it? I certainly haven't. At least not until today.
I thought about ordering in, but since we had leftovers, I made us lunch. What's with the face? I think my cooking turned out pretty good today.
Oh, okay, great.
A sudden crisis. What should I do, Zach?
I might not be a wonder chef like Thomas, but I do practice every day. Well, come on, tell it to me straight.
Emily?
Yes? What?
I went into the sewer once during an investigation.
Okay, just stop right there.
The same can't be said about the cooking skills of Thomas, the sheriff's assistant, especially when it comes to biscuits.
This is a good biscuit. I've never tasted a biscuit this delicious. Where in town can I get these?
Well, actually, I baked them myself.
That's amazing. What are you doing in law enforcement? I'm very particular about biscuits, I'll have you know. The balance of milk and butter you've achieved here. Oh my.
He also demonstrates a vast knowledge of various squirrels.
You don't know your squirrels, do you? This isn't the right key holder. This is a Siberian flying squirrel. It's closer to a land-based squirrel. The Siberian flying squirrel is larger than the southern flying squirrel and has a standing tail while the southern has a hanging tail. But we're looking for a southern flying squirrel right now.
You sure do know a lot about squirrels.
He's a bit on the shy side and quite effeminate. He has a distinct tattoo on his back that says Lovely G. Who is the Lovely G in question? Hold that thought for now.
You ought to see that tattoo, Zach. A big heart with an arrow through it and Love G in the center.
I don't know when he got that done, but we've all been through the 80s.
On the topic of food, we have Nick and Olivia Cormack running the A&G Diner. They have a strained relationship. York, with his love of movies, is all about Olivia Newton-John when first meeting Olivia.
There's that famous singer, too, isn't there? From the 70s? She's actually from England, but she's got this really strong image of being an American pop singer.
Huh?
That's it. Olivia Newton-John. You know of her, right? She's not only a successful singer, she's successful as an actress, too.
Personally, I really liked Xanadu back in 1980. She played a cute fairy and just looked amazingly stunning. It's hard to believe she was 32 at the time. Right, Zach?
Nick is very cold and distant. He doesn't take kindly to those entering his kitchen.
Hey, I'm working here. You can't just stroll into a chef's kitchen.
Then perhaps you would give me your permission to enter.
No, get the hell out of here.
Zach, everyone has their own sanctuary.
But he is a master of cooking, best exemplified by the Sinner Sandwich, a turkey sandwich with strawberry jam and cereal. If you're like me, this scene was your introduction to Deadly Premonition back in the day, one that helped with its word of mouth through the gaming landscape, one that helped spread the joys to find within Deadly Premonition.
I can't believe it. This is fantastic. It's really good. Olivia, I'm sorry, but can I change my order? I'll have what Harry is having.
We can thank Harry Stewart for suggesting the sandwich. He is introduced as a mysterious capitalist. He comes from a wealthy family. He owns most of the land in Greenvale. A reclusive figure, he uses a wheelchair while wearing a gas mask. In tow is his assistant Michael. He talks on behalf of Mr. Stewart, or so says Mr. Stewart. He always addresses the person he's talking to by their full name and speaks in rhymes.
Mr. Francis York Morgan, some tea with sugar is what's best admired. By your body that looks so tired. So says Mr. Stewart.
Olivia and Nick aren't the only married couple running a store in Greenvale. Running the Heaven and Hell gas station is Gina the Rose and Jack the Bull. Gina's outfit and choice of words don't leave much to the imagination.
Oh, I've never seen you here before. You in town to see some sights? Uh-huh.
Jack's an angry man of few words. He will open up if we introduce him to Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin, my good buddy. Listen up. I got something new to tell ya. I'll tell you another one when I see you again.
Running the Milk Bar convenience store is Keith and Lily Ingram. Keith is a rocker, although he talks more like a surfer than someone into rockabilly. Wouldn't he be trying to sound someone more like Elvis? He's always tapping to some kind of tune and refers to York as FBI.
What do you know? He gave me that guitar, man. He said that the soul of rock should be passed on to the next generation. That is how the legendary guitar Grekach came into my hands. Well, thanks for listening anyway, FBI. It means a lot to me.
Lily is very kind and caring, always referring to us as Hun, the one who gets us to clean up the storage room for rewards with box puzzles. There were several times throughout these puzzles I get near the end and realize I screwed up. Oh, those box puzzles. Keith and Lily have twin boys, Isaac and Isaiah. They look exactly like the boys we see in the Red Room that York visits throughout. They even talk in the same fashion. It was them, along with their grandfather Jim Green, who discovered Nana's body in the woods. The father of Lily, Jim, is the forest keeper of Greenvale. Down the road from the milk barn is Wesley the gunsmith. He has a fondness for cards, which we can collect through our journeys around Greenvale. Does he want them for himself? No, he only wishes to look at them. Polly Oxford runs the hotel that York stays at. She's hard of hearing and can mistake what York says for some amusing situations. She misses her late husband and can tend to ramble about everything and nothing.
Thank you, Polly.
You reminded me a little of a play I saw when I was younger.
What kind of play?
I'm talking about back when this place was still called the Mercury Theater. When I was young, I used to come here often with my husband. God rest his soul. We'd come on the weekend to see the latest play. He'd always pretend to be uninterested, but I could tell he was excited inside. He was just one of those kind of guys, really, thinking about it now.
Back in the day, she was quite the looker, coming in second place at the Miss Greenvale contest. Who won first place? That would be Roaming Sigourney, aka the Pot Lady. You could find her roaming Greenvale with her pot. We could help her several times throughout to get her home before her pot gets cold.
Hurry! Hurry! Step on it! Why do you have to drive so safely? Can't you see my pot is getting cold? This is not good. It's losing more and more of its warmth.
And there are words of wisdom to come from this pot.
The more steps it takes to cook a stew, the better it tastes when it's cooked.
At the front desk of the hospital, we have Fiona, or Freckles. She's an avid reader, getting her teeth straightened out with braces. When you first meet her, she's reading a book with a plot like Deadly Premonition, or of course, Twin Peaks.
You haven't heard of this yet? It's a recent bestseller mystery. It's set in the U.S., a small traditional North American town close to the Canadian border. A peaceful, traditional place. However, that peaceful town is shattered by a terrible crime, the murder of a local girl. And that incident causes grief and sadness to everyone in town. But everyone feels the seditious, heinous evil still lurking, alive. Yes, much like the situation right now here in Greenvale.
Usher Johnson is the town doctor. He's very much into chess, something that he bonds with York over.
Bishop takes queen. His rook takes your queen. Then your knight takes rook. And checkmate.
Huh?
Oh. My first victory in the Grandmaster ranking.
More towards the outskirts of town, we have some odd individuals. One is Brian the Gravekeeper, suffering from insomnia. Being a gravekeeper, that should give you some indication of this character. General Lysander is the owner of the junkyard. A Vietnam War veteran, there are some discrepancies to him. York notes that despite calling himself a general, he's wearing a sergeant's uniform. The badge looks like it was sewn on something else prior. Through doing a side quest, we can learn why he does this in a sad, touching revelation. There's a funny story he tells here about cooking during the war. Reminds me of that one Seinfeld episode where Frank Costanza talks about his cooking incident during the Korean War.
He endangered the lives of every member of the unit. Stomach pains. The worst stomachache ever. Every one of us. It was just cooking. He was using food that was contaminated. I flew into the dugout toilet like an Apache chopper returning to base. I have to tell you, it was a close call. My engine was boosting.
There are a couple bars in town, one being the Galaxy of Terror. Carol McLean, the sister of Sheriff's Assistant Thomas, runs the place. She has a nice set of pipes on her, with one of the many memorable tracks from the game. The other bar in town is Swery 65. It's run by Richard Dunn. His son Quint helps him out. Quint made quite the memorable entrance in my game, and not how the game intended. His girlfriend is Becky, who is Anna's best friend. She comes from a rich family, considering her house. While we don't see her parents, nor are they mentioned, she does have an older sister, Diane, one who rolls into town a few days after York arrives. She's the owner of the Muses Art Gallery, a promiscuous individual that the other women in town don't hold in high regard.
Oh, I sleep with anyone I wish. Anyone I prefer to sleep with. I guess she had her eye on one of them, but I don't know who it was exactly. I could sleep with you, if you like.
I'm flattered by your offer, but I don't think that would be appropriate. You're exactly the kind of woman a man in my job should never get involved with.
Isn't that a shame, darling?
When she returns to town, she returns with Forrest Kaysen, or FK. This Gabe Newell-looking fellow is a traveling sapling salesman. A friendly figure, he becomes a key player in the grand scheme of the plot. In tow with Forrest is Willie, his Dalmatian. Willie will serve as a guide at a few points throughout the game.
Right. We were just about to go take a morning stroll, so I'll get going. Good luck now with that case.
Thanks.
Zach, do you remember what the coffee said? Forrest Kaysen. F.K.
This show has just begun.
At the center of everything happening in Greenvale is Anna Graham. Her murder is the reason for York being in town. Despite being dead, her presence looms large over Deadly Premonition. We'll see her several times throughout in the Otherworld sections. Sally is Anna's mother. Also a widow, it's no surprise she's struggling in the wake of her daughter's death. There are some sad moments throughout where she's acting as if Anna is still alive. Some of her behaviors are similar to how Leyland Palmer acted in the wake of Laura's death in Twin Peaks.
She wasn't the kind of girl that would walk around at night. She was always dancing under the sun. Yes, under the pouring sunshine, like this.
A quirky FBI agent, the murder of a young girl, a town in the Pacific Northwest near the US-Canadian border, a diner, a lady carrying a pot. Some of the many elements that take heavy influence from Twin Peaks. It's all over the place here. But more at the surface level, the broad strokes. Once you read between the lines, you can see how much Deadly Premonition is its own thing. It has that Japanese take on it. Twin Peaks has a large following in Japan. Swery 65 has always been a bit evasive when asked about Twin Peaks as an influence, but it's night and day. Look at older footage when the game was known as Rainy Woods, and the twins in the Red Room were twin dwarves inside a red room instead of a forest.
Could you wait just a little longer? This won't take long.
2010 was a good year for games inspired by Twin Peaks. You had Alan Wake released the same year. Greenvale doesn't feel like a location with a bunch of NPCs close together. It feels like a town full of interesting characters. There's plenty of interaction amongst these characters. Some you'll run into going about their day as you make a trip to the milk barn or the diner. It's those characters close to Anna where most of the overlap occurs. We'll discover these connections and solve further mysteries as the game unfolds. While plenty of this comes from the critical path, we could dive in further with side quests. There's 50 of them. Some are straightforward, some with stage stages of progression. Some we can only access after completing other side quests. Some you can only access during select times, weathers, or chapter. Although the game offers a chapter select if you want to return later on, very handy to complete ones you missed. I have to know how it's funny that whenever someone discusses time in town, they do so by a 24-hour clock.
The gallery is open from 10 to 1700.
You do have various ways to kill time. You can let it play out, take a rest, have a lunch break, or smoke a cigarette. Did Kojima take some cues here from Deadly Premonition? Some side quests are more for upgrades. One of the earliest side quests for George rewards us with a radio. This allows you to fast travel to visited locations, a godsend as you progress to save time in the tedium of driving. The screeching tires always gave me a chuckle each time I used the radio. I know I've heard this stock sound elsewhere. It works so well here. Lily's chain of side quests involves the classic box pushing puzzles. Our reward is a discount on items at the milk barn. The general tasks us with finding items in his junkyard, with car upgrades as our reward. Side quests of characters closer to Anna give more insights into the main plot. Those involving Quentin, Becky, Carol, or Sally in particular. One chain of quests between Olivia and Nick help patch up their rocky relationship. But all give some insight into the residents of Greenvale, their quirks and their relationships. They do what good side quests should do. We get insight into their lives within Greenvale and the town itself. It helps flesh out the world and plays a part in why the cast of Deadly Premonition is so memorable.
Doesn't matter what town you're from. Girls will be girls.
You know, Zach, in this wonderful country of ours, there are no good old-fashioned towns left. None at all.
There are a lot of small details in Deadly Premonition that don't do a whole lot, but add to the charm of the world. Like shaving. You could shave at any washroom you find. It was funny to see the option come up when I was searching Anna's room. Kind of odd to shave in a dead person's room, isn't it? Or shaving in a washroom during the Otherworld sections. York shaving with a straight razor and carrying one at all times feels in line with his character. While driving, you could use windshield wipers and turn signals. Speaking of driving, cars handle like ass. The cars lack weight. It's one of those areas where getting that radio for fast travel makes things easier. That said, the car rides service nice moments, where York talks to Zach or other passengers. Some that flesh out the story, the greater world, and about York himself.
Agent York, you seem very confident about this.
Confident? No. Confidence is a sweet spot between being rude and hopeless. I'm just drawing natural conclusions from the facts that we've seen.
That sounds exactly like being full of confidence, at least to me, and to normal people with common sense.
Common sense can be the opposite of fact sometimes. Bear that in mind.
The map is pretty useless. It's zoomed in way too far by default, and you can't zoom out any further. You can move between key locations while looking at the map. As unhelpful as the zoomed-in map is, it's easy to see where people are and what side quests are currently available. The town of Greenvale is spread out, most notably the park, but you get to know your way around as you progress. Before we can fast travel to a location, we need to visit it first. A good idea to help you get a lay of the land. There's a hunger and energy system in place, but it's easy to deal with. Not something to really worry about. We'll find plenty in our travels, and we can stop at stores to stock up. For a change of pace, we have these Otherworld sections, where York is alone with the shadows. I have to note the feeling of unease these sections produce. Even if enemies are easy affairs, the change in environment and music do a great job of creating unease.
Just as I thought, Zach. This is where Anna was killed.
Time doesn't matter here. I love these spinning clocks emphasizing this. These shadow zombie-like creatures are pretty unnerving with how they behave. How they talk, how they bend over backwards, how they speed up for a stretch as they approach. That said, combat offers a little challenge and feels half-baked, with something added later in development. Publishers feared Western audiences wouldn't approve of no combat. It's not the game's strong suit. It takes the RE4 approach of over the shoulder, or standing still while shooting. Aiming is iffy. Instead of snapping to where York is looking, it snaps to where the camera is looking. It's not a major issue since combat isn't a huge challenge, but it feels off and takes time to adjust to. There's little weight in how these weapons handle. I do like York's comments while shooting. Nice encouraging words to the player. You can hold your breath for a time to trick enemies and bypass them. You can also run past most enemies. There's only a few mandatory combat sections, but they don't pose much of a challenge. Narrow hallways can halt your progress in trying to run around enemies. There's only one enemy type that shows up later that poses any kind of challenge, those being the ones that crawl up the walls. Even then, they're pretty straightforward affairs. There's a dodging system like RE4 with context prompts. We're given plenty of time to dodge. One recurring enemy we'll deal with in these sections is the Raincoat Killer, an important character of the plot. These are annoying encounters. They're easy to deal with but go on way too long. There's stretches where we'll hide from him. Hold your breath to not alert the Raincoat Killer of our presence. Having these sections be a quarter of the length would have been much better. Some of these are a good 2.5 minutes of sitting around. Same thing for the chase scenes. During these chases, you're wiggling the analog stick back and forth. Dodge when the context prompts come up. Like the hiding sections, they're padded out and go on far longer than need be. During these otherworld sections, we'll find clues to build out a profile. I love how these progress as we find clues. At first, the profile is fuzzy, out of focus, lacking context.
What are you doing here? So it was you. Much more astonishing than I imagined. I'm impressed. No! Don't! I'm not gonna stop!
Once we find all the clues, we have a better understanding of what happened here. Even then, more questions arise.
What are you doing here? So it was you. Much more astonishing than I imagined. I'm impressed. No! Don't! I'm not gonna stop!
Despite this being a murder mystery, the player can't fail anything along the critical path. Clues are essential for progress. You can't miss them. The player can't accuse others of being the murderer in game. There are no fail states along that line, which for a game doing investigative work could be a disappointment, but I never felt that way with Deadly Premonition. It has its story it wants to tell. There's a lot of enjoyment in seeing York's thought process of putting the pieces together. At the end of certain chapters, the game will ask you questions about the case. While you can't pick the wrong answer, the game makes you try again. It's more of a reminder of what's going on with the case. With that, let's go through the major plot beats of Deadly Premonition, so spoilers ahead. One of the first notable moments is taking a look at Anna's corpse at the hospital morgue. We get to see York's brilliant detective work and one that paints a disturbing picture of Anna's death.
From her lack of resistance, I'd say that Anna's injuries happened very quickly. Unable to speak, she was then left to cry herself to death.
Zach, it's all starting to come together.
The perpetrator stayed with her for at least 2 hours until it stopped raining. At the estimated time of her death, it was still raining, but you can still see tear marks on her cheeks. That means she was killed under a roof somewhere. She was then carried into the woods after it stopped raining.
There's one other thing. Her tongue was removed with a very blunt knife. In fact, it's more likely it was simply chopped off.
A key finding from York puts the investigation under the control of the FBI.
Jackpot, Zach. A shame, but our old-time all-American sightseeing tour just came to an end.
This case is now under the jurisdiction of the FBI. I'm assuming command. I'll need you to assist me in the investigation.
What in the hell do you mean, Agent Morgan? I know I said I was passionate, but you can't think I did this.
That's not why I'm assuming command, George. You're a suspect just as much as every other passionate man on Earth. Let me show you something. There you go. Amazing, huh?
It's a great scene in one of those scenes with constant shifts in music tracks. As a result, the scene shifts in mood as it progresses. But the game also knows when to get serious. We're off to talk with Jim Green and his grandsons Isaac and Isaiah. They're the ones who found Anna's body. We'll get some character clashes here with York wanting to talk to the twins about what happened. York comes across as a cold city FBI boy by the others.
Hold on. Don't do anything without asking me. These children were the first to witness the crime scene. I want to talk to them.
Come on, they're just kids. They have no idea what really happened to Anna.
That doesn't matter.
You agree with me, right, Zach?
How heartless. Do you ever think of other people's feelings, ever?
Emily's right. That's stone cold, even for the sake of investigation.
Children see things in pure, simple terms. They may have seen something we adults would never spot, and they are here at our request as well. We could at least chat with them and see if they want to make a statement.
Are you serious?
I never joke about matters like this.
Oh my God.
We get some insights from the twins of how they view Anna.
We didn't know until then.
But we know now.
Anna was the fairy of the forest.
She was a goddess.
She smiled when she saw us.
She looked so happy.
That's right, Isaac. Isaiah. She was a fairy. A goddess.
Doing some further detective work, York finds footprints coming from stiletto heels. Emily and George know that the only woman in town, Diane, would do such a thing. At the moment, Diane is out of town. Here we get into a rhythm of Deadly Premonition. Get some plot insights, take some drives, have some chats, enter otherworld sections, at least along the critical path. Depending on the chapter, we can have access to certain side quests. Throughout the otherworld journeys, we'll come across these upside-down peace signs. They look to be a tattoo on someone. To eliminate them as suspects, York gets Emily and George to show their backs.
Are you satisfied now?
Yes. My apologies.
George's back tells a disturbing tale.
Huh?
George!
What are these scars?
Just like your Mr. Zack. Something private. I don't have to tell you about it.
Of course. Just like Zack.
On the note of disturbing tales, George gives us folklore about the Raincoat Killer.
A vicious killer in a bright red raincoat. Yeah, that was it. Just a foolish piece of superstition. A rubbish story someone made up. Not many people still believe it, but I guess it's a traditional place. Most of the shops still close up when it rains. School's out too. And since there's no reason to go out, not many people ever wear raincoats.
And now the Raincoat Killer has leapt out from his picture book.
York wants to address the town in one large gathering to talk about the murder of Anna. There's a lot for the game to note here. Depending on your exploration, you may have met some of the townsfolk already, else you're meeting them here for the first time. The game does update their dialogue on the regular when we go to talk with them, something that does wonders for making them feel more like characters than simple NPCs. There's a good portion of dialogue without voiceover, making it easier to do so. Something I wish other games weren't afraid to do. You don't need to voice 100% of every written word. Throughout the game, York will have dreams of the Red Room. The twins will be there and some key characters will pop up. More mysteries and questions arise here.
What are you doing here?
My name is Becky.
Anna's friend?
My name is Becky.
After your throat is quenched, you must do what you must do.
Take a sip of coffee and go.
Deadly Premonition does a great job of pacing out how the plot unfolds. It's not in any rush. When we get answers, we get even more questions. Diane, the owner of the art gallery and Becky's sister, has returned to town. She came in with Forrest Kaysen, the sapling salesman. When arriving at her art gallery, we see Olivia from the diner leaving. Something is going on between Diane and Olivia's husband, Nick.
Do you come here often then?
Well, no. Just sometimes. I'm sorry, I really need to get back to the diner.
Zack, she was lying about something. She said trees, not paintings of trees. She doesn't need to come here to see trees. There's tons of trees outside.
We get the infamous dinner scene at the diner that I showed earlier, but what follows is one of the game's highlights. Emily and York getting to know each other better. Emily wasn't born in Greenvale. She moved here from Seattle while still in high school, and York continues to surprise and bring up his high school past, a topic he'll discuss with Zack during various car rides moving forward.
I get where you're coming from. I used to dress like a hardcore punk rocker when I was in high school.
You? A punk rocker?
Nobody took my side, even when I had good grades. People rejected me just because of what I wore. I was young back then, too.
Even still, I just don't see you as a punk rocker.
And you laugh? Look at you, with no makeup on, dressed in uniform, eating a steak for lunch. You and I like punk rock, but we like different types of punk. You liked hard and heavy punk, like Crash and Sham 69. I like the more twisted ones, like The Damned, Buzzcocks, Iggy Pop, and Joy Division.
The budding relationship between Emily and York has great pacing. Up until now, we see how they could be at odds with one another.
City folk, huh? No, I take that back. All of them can't be as bad as him, and some should have better manners.
As Deadly Premonition progresses, they come to a better understanding of one another, something the game doesn't rush and gives time to breathe. While digging into what's happening between Diane and Nick, we get word that something has happened at Becky's house. After another Otherworld section, we get a very brutal scene with the death of Becky. There are several similarities between her and Anna's death, like the removal of her tongue. I've played my fair share of horror games with unsettling imagery, but this one has stuck out with me for its brutality.
George, stay back. She's trying to speak.
We don't have time! She's dying! Thomas, cut that wire. No! We must get her to the hospital immediately. What? What are you doing? Get out of the way! I'll do it!
No, don't! George, stop!
We're back to digging into Nick as a suspect. He doesn't have an alibi at this point, and what's he doing with Diane? What follows is a tailing mission from Carol's bar to Diane's art gallery. A long drive following Nick. Like, if they had us following him for a minute or so, then cut the rest, that's fine. Deadly Premonition has issues with padding, but it's manageable. It grows out of control in the sequel. After another Otherworld section, we find Diane strung up in the gallery. While she's still alive, she does soon meet her end. Like Anna and Becky before her, she has her tongue cut out.
Oh, what a beautiful beach! The witchy one who fear off is the many direction. Combinating the sharp voices, glide away into nothingness, inspiring a truly deep eroticism in all who create. Every woman will find herself about being penetrated by those sharp voices. This piece is most unimaginable to value. And yet, this is far more than a wooden piece of art. It is a blessed masterpiece for everyone can
Diane?
themselves. Come closer. Beg to this
Diane! Stop right there, Nick. You're under arrest for the attempted murder of Diane Ames. Huh. Back off! Don't touch me!
Diane, no! Move!
Emily, hurry!
We'll find Forrest locked up at the gallery. We're still no closer to solving this case. Meeting at Carol's bar, we'll learn where George got all his scars from. In a show of growing trust, he refers to York as York instead of Agent Morgan.
My mother would hit me every time I asked why. And it didn't stop there. If I ate too slow, left my shoes scattered around, TV volume too loud, she found reasons to hit me. Hit me bad. The worst was what she called the tree punishment. She'd whip my back with these thin tree branches like a whip.
Please, Mama. I won't do it again. That hurts, Mama. I'm sorry, please. I'm sorry.
Tree punishment was definitely the worst, I tell you. York. I've been an arrogant fool, haven't I? And if it weren't for me, both Becky and Diane would still be alive.
Emily joins us for a drink, cleaning up well.
Sorry to keep you waiting, boys.
Zach, Emily is already a goddess of the forest.
Let's forget work for a bit and drink a little, shall we?
Joining York at his hotel room, York goes more into his past than about his parents. His father was an FBI agent, the first to use criminal profiling to solve cases. We also learn about their tragic end and who Zach is to York.
I was 7. I woke up one morning to hear my mother crying in the living room. This wasn't normal, so I headed in to see her. My father was there pointing a gun at my mother. I was so scared. I closed my eyes, so I don't remember much more.
But I do remember the words my father said to me. At times we must purge things from this world because they should not exist, even if it means losing someone that you love. When I came back to my senses, they were both dead. He shot my mother and then killed himself.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. Zach's with me. It was around that time that we became friends. I'm here. I'm with you, he said. I'll be here always. We can get through this together.
This section ends with a foreboding, mysterious shot of somewhere we haven't been. Deadly Premonition will have long stretches of characters talking uninterrupted, but I never found myself waiting for conversations to end to get back to playing. The developers put in a lot of legwork to make compelling characters that you want to learn more about. Plus, it's not like the gameplay is anything to write home about. The next morning, the coffee guides York of who to talk to next, the reclusive, wealthy Harry Stewart.
It says to hurry, and the first letter of each line is H-A-R-R-Y. Hurry to Harry. Looks like the time that he was talking about has come. Let's go pay the problematic rich boy who owns half of the town a visit.
He has an eccentric mansion for us to navigate, to say the least. All these guest rooms with no mirrors? York's got some guts using that straight razor without a mirror. Here, the game gets into some padding territory. Harry sends us to find some red seeds at the graveyard and return afterwards, in which we have more mansion eccentricities to deal with. And to our surprise, Harry now speaks. We get a big lore dump involving the Raincoat Killer and the red seeds. This isn't the first Raincoat Killer, who Harry refers to as the new Raincoat Killer. The red seeds that York has found in other cases come from Greenvale.
York, Anna, Becky, and now Diane. Their deaths are real, not folklore, not legend. The Raincoat Killer is also real. But under a strict gag order, the mass murder case was never made public. In fact, one could say that it was completely erased from history. Tell me, who do you think would be able to do something like that?
The military.
Very good. A model student.
Harry sends us on another fetch quest to find old documents from the sheriff's station, one that talks about the Raincoat Killer from 50 years ago. With Thomas missing and evidence piling up against him, Thomas becomes a key suspect. Thanks to the coffee once again, York knows where to go next.
George, Emily, we're going to Velvet Falls. There's something waiting for us there. I can feel it.
York, are you joking? You're trusting your cup?
No, Emily. Going to a waterfall just might be a good idea. In feng shui, a waterfall is known to be a source of power.
With a fishing minigame, because of course Deadly Premonition would have one, we find the old documents. It details the ritual of the new Raincoat Killer.
Good fishing, Zach. We've caught something to brag about now. In all the history of the FBI, I'm probably the only one who fished out documents thrown into a waterfall. Don't you think so, Zach?
Returning to Harry, we get another large info dump about what happened 50 years ago with the Raincoat Killer. For whatever reason, this scene didn't work for me. It slowed to a crawl. so I had to grab footage of this scene off a playthrough on YouTube. Harry heads to the top of the clock tower to find soldiers emitting gas into the town below. There's a stocky man here with a red sapling nearby, similar in stature to Forrest. Interesting that we don't get a look at his face. The townsfolk have gone mad. Amongst them is a man in a raincoat. Under the hood is Harry's father. Harry shares some familiar words with York to end this info dump.
York, at times we must purge things from this world because they should not exist. Even if it means losing someone that you love.
But that still does not justify murder.
Remember this. Everything changes in form.
Heading to Thomas's apartment, we're on track again to find out where he is and his secrets.
So, Thomas wants us to look around for him a bit more. So there's more to it. Kind of like the bonus footage on a DVD.
We'll have another world section, Carol's Bar, that takes us to a hidden room we saw earlier. The one that was a foreboding shot to end a previous chapter. But thanks to cutscene incompetence, Thomas gets the drop on us.
Zach, okay, so it's not bonus footage. It's still part of the main feature. The perpetrator is exactly who I thought it was. First things first. We'd better let poor Nick go.
One of the game's more amusing stretches follows with us playing as Emily. Using Forrest's dog Willie to pick up his scent, we'll follow him throughout town. This is where the soundtrack changes to the opening credits of a mid-90s film starring Pauly Shore. Emily's stamina doesn't drop at all, something that York suffers from. Guess it's all that smoking. An amusing sight is Case and with us in tow, never losing a step. This section goes on far longer than it needs to, but the music makes it manageable and memorable. At points, we'll switch back between York tied up and running around as Emily, both coming to realize how much they care about one another.
And that glimmer in her eyes when she argues every word I say. Her blonde hair lit by the dawn. Eating steak at the diner. Giving me directions in the car. The horror on her face in the gallery. And that coffee she made. And it's like she's a goddess in a tight dress. Zach, let's pray that she doesn't become a real goddess.
Willie's tracking leads us to the clock tower, leading to a boss fight against Thomas.
It was so much better back then. We had so much fun. Emily? That was before you came. I won't let you have him! You filthy pig!
Considering the game's substandard combat mechanics, the fight itself isn't too bad. Nothing to write home about, but it could have been far worse. With an alibi unaccounted for, York comes to the conclusion that George is the murderer. We're in the home stretch here. In another world section of the sheriff's station, we'll come across Carol. She's on her dying breaths, another victim of the Raincoat Killer. This music track, which pops up throughout the game, is fantastic for these kind of scenes. The sheer chaos it conveys with the wailing saxophones.
Carol? Carol?
Yeah!
York gets Kaysen to take Emily to the hospital to treat her, while he deals with George. George gets his time to shine here, giving a great villain monologue.
But me, unlike you, I am strong. I have power. My mother taught me, the strong, who can overpower others, is always correct and right. My mother stepped on my face with her stiletto heels because she had power. And when her heel pierced my cheek, I learned to respect her. Since then, I obtained power of my own and found my own disciples. I became divine. All I need now is that goddess of fate, and grab her with my hands. I want Emily in her stiletto heels.
You're out of your mind. The goddess won't smile for you anymore, George.
He then turns into a shonen villain for his final form. A bit out of place, but hey, it's not like Deadly Premonition hasn't gone in unexpected directions.
With an imagination like that, you belong in the zoo. The Hollywood Zoo.
But there are still some loose ends to wrap up. Emily never arrived at the hospital. George kept referring to someone else in our final confrontation. Forrest Kaysen leaves a key to George's house. If you tried to go inside earlier in the game, George wouldn't let you in. He mentioned he had a sick mother to take care of, the one he faced severe abuse from. We'll find her remains in the basement, along with a revelation about the upside-down peace signs and Forrest Kaysen.
It wasn't a reverse peace mark. Tree. F.K. Kaysen. Forrest Kaysen. He's the one. Emily.
Before our final showdown, we'll flash back to 1956 and get to play as the Raincoat Killer. While the section does drag, it's a long trek to get to the clock tower. Something is fascinating about getting to play as the Raincoat Killer. A dark, stormy night, crazed townfolk, and Amazing Grace in the background makes for a disorienting experience. There's always a choice in narrative sections to go the cutscene route or the gameplay route. I find most modern games veer too much into the quote-unquote gameplay route, which involves walking and talking when a cutscene would have sufficed. And while this stretch does go on too long, it is quite memorable to give the player the chance to play as the Raincoat Killer, a much better choice than showing this through a cutscene. And this time we get to see the face of the stocky man. It is Forrest Kaysen. Encountering him in the present day, Forrest turns on a dime here, dropping that friendly facade. Very much a despicable, heinous force of an unspeakable evil.
George! Oh, right, George. He was a funny one. I gave him a toy locket, and he was so impressed, so moved. But he wasn't very intelligent. He was born in this town, you see, and it took him too long to discover the red seeds. binding down people with rules is a sign of small-mindedness. And that was what George represented in life.
Especially for what he's done to Emily.
York, I'm sorry.
It's okay, Emily. Hurry, come over here. We need to get you to the hospital.
I can't. I can't go to you. I've been soiled.
No, that's not true. You have a heart that can't be soiled. No matter what happens to your body, you are still yourself.
York,
Oh, didn't I tell you? Getting these saplings to sprout requires a certain technique. What do you think? Artistic, isn't it? It's like a surrealistic painting.
It's here we learn the true fate of York's parents and Forrest's role in it. Along with that, we get the revelation of Zack and York.
At times we must purge things from this world because they should not exist. Even if it means losing someone that you love. Yes, I couldn't do it. However, you can. When the time comes and you have to make that decision, make the right one. Okay, Zack?
Morgan, Francis, Zack, Morgan, Francis, Zack, Morgan.
I remember. I traded places with York. York, the other me. My other personality.
Zack, please shoot. Kill me.
Zack, repeating the words of his father, can't bring himself to shoot Emily. She removes the sapling herself. Emily dies and passes into the forest, a goddess like the others.
York and Zack. Finally, I understand. You two really are best friends. I'm a little jealous.
Hey, stand up, Zack. It's up to you now. Emily, I finally got to meet you face to face. But you had to go with York, didn't you? He always gets the girl. He's a good guy. You see that too, right? He kept talking to me and ended up pulling me back out of that room. I'm sure he'll make you very happy.
We'll have a couple of fights with Forrest, showing his true form, which, like George, gets a bit out there. But hey, this is the end game. They've more than earned it. It's too bad that the game throws in the chase scene that kills the momentum. Like the chase sections with the raincoat killer, this goes on far longer than it has to. Wrapping things up in town, Harry Stewart gives some further revelations. George was Harry's son. His inactions years ago set the wheels in motion of what happened in town. Before parting Greenvale, Zack makes a trip to the forest to say some final goodbyes.
Emily kind of told us to give this to you.
Emily said it's a present for Zack.
Thank you.
Where did you get this?
Emily asked us to give it to you. See? She's over there.
There's another Zach there too. You're twins, just like us.
Emily couldn't give it to you herself. She said she's too embarrassed. So, she asked us to hand it to you.
Emily really likes you, Zach. She really likes you.
No, she doesn't. Not me. She really likes that guy York, the guy you see standing next to her. Anyways, you two. Be nice to the girls, okay? And they'll be nice to you.
We don't like girls.
Girls are boring.
So things get pretty out there in the last stretch of Deadly Premonition. Well, more than the rest of the game. There are several details I've glossed over here. But as mentioned before, Deadly Premonition takes its time with its reveals. It doesn't rush them out the door. It gives them time to breathe. Which is why the whole element of best bad game never quite sat right with me. Sure, the gameplay is pretty ho-hum, nothing to write home about, but there's a method to the madness here in the story. Yes, things get downright silly and somewhat nonsensical at times, but making such lovable characters, such a large cast that feels like a living, breathing town, that's no happy accident. As well, how the romance unfolds between York and Emily is one of the better ones I've come across in the game. They could be at odds with one another at first, but not in a way that makes either one of them unlikable. Throughout the game, they come to understand one another through key scenes. It's a gut punch of what happens to Emily in the endgame. Although she and York find happiness in the afterlife, or forest, or wherever they end up. The whole best bad game is a very surface level take of what Deadly Premonition is. It's what's below the surface that has made it such a beloved title with a strong following, and it would be over a decade later in which Deadly Premonition would get a sequel. A sequel that, at many points, leans too much into the surface level elements of what Deadly Premonition was.
This is it, Zach. A deadly premonition. You know, for some reason I'm getting butterflies. How about you?
Deadly Premonition 2 is one of the most frustrating titles I've played in a long time, for several reasons. It's a game that needed more time in the kitchen. Gameplay stretches consist of some of the worst padding and fetch quests I played in years, to the point where even the developer at Ubisoft would be thinking it's too much. It's like the team focused on the memes and surface level elements of what people enjoyed about Deadly Premonition. What you end up with is a new cast of characters that lean into one-note elements. York, while still likable and enjoyable, suffers from some exaggerated characteristics. Further adding to the frustration is that there are moments of brilliance, especially in the end stretch. But the game does everything in its power to get in your way of reaching there. At several points throughout, I was thinking, there are so many better things I could be doing with my time. To the point where I wish they did something like a visual novel instead to tell its story. I could see why Deadly Premonition 2 came and went the way it did. Let's take a look at why.
Zach, that was a bad move. We stepped right into a private matter without any shoes on. But these things are bound to happen. After all, I'm a special agent of the FBI. And there isn't an organization out there that's more well-versed in the art of infringing on people's privacy.
Here I'm playing the PC version. No frame rate issues that plagued the original Switch release. There is a fan patch to get better performance and quality of life improvements. Check out the entry on PC Gaming Wiki for a link. That said, I would have visual glitches every once in a while, where black lines would appear on characters during close-ups. Else, everything was smooth sailing. Deadly Premonition 2 has a narrative structure that jumps across time. Most of the time, we'll be playing as York in Lucaré, Louisiana in the year of 2005, 5 years before the events of Greenvale in the original. But kicking the game off, it's December 30th, 2018 in Lucaré. There was a body found in ice. We cut to Thompsonville, a suburb of Boston. FBI agents Aaliyah Davis and Simon Jones are questioning Francis Jack Morgan. During these present-day stretches, we play as Aaliyah. The last 9-ish years haven't been kind to Zach. He's aged far more than that. He has stage 4 cancer. He can't have that much time left. He's talking to an unseen fairy. Zach took 2 years of sick leave after the Greenvale case. After that, he switched to desk work.
But my fairy clearly exists. She's been sitting right there on your lap this entire time. Hey, stop it. No violence allowed in here, Belle. Wouldn't want to scare my fairy, now would we?
Ali and Simon are here to question Zach about the 2005 case in Lucaré, Louisiana, the one he solved while on vacation. Lisa Clark, the body we see in the intro, was the root for that case. Her body was never found until now. Aaliyah and Simon bring up the similarities between the Le Carre case and the Greenvale case. The red trees present in both spots.
The red trees. You really did your homework. Well done, Belle. You're good. Damn good.
We get an intro credits scene and song that takes heavy influence from the first season of True Detective and James Bond films. I love this one shot of this lady shaking her booty with weed shorts. To an extent, Deadly Premonition 2 takes cues from that first season of True Detective, the Louisiana setting, the narrative framework of reviewing an old case with unsolved mysteries, protagonists who've seen better days. Doesn't go much farther than that, however. Unlike the original, Deadly Premonition 2 isn't afraid to have a long dialogue stretch to begin the game. These sections in the present day with Zach, Aaliyah, and Simon can go on for some time, at many points far too long, especially as the game progresses, well over an hour in length. These stretches can repeat information we've seen from the 2005 sections. Other bits are fluff that add little to the narrative. To see Zach in the state he's in, I was unsure what to make of it at first. To see such a lovable character fall so low, but hey, stage 4 cancer will do that to you. As far as characters go, Aaliyah and Simon are okay. Aaliyah is an up-and-coming special agent in the FBI, talents that Zach acknowledges. That said, her hard-nosed demeanor makes her not the most likable of characters.
Time is valuable precisely because it can't be seen. Yet nowadays people can't tell what time it is unless it's measured in numbers. Talk about idiocy. I don't mean to side with the Board of Longitude, but remember, humans used to cross oceans with the stars alone. We have our eyes to read moon charts and study the sky. We don't need clocks.
What if it's cloudy or storming?
All you need is courage and a love for adventure.
Hear that, my fairy? Courage and a love for adventure?
Simon serves as the comic relief of the duo, although at times he could be inconsistent with how competent he is. Sometimes a goofy, bumbling oaf, sometimes someone who's quite astute to what's going on.
You know, you've got a point. Movies teach us about everything we need to know. I learned about the right way to eat frozen pizza from Cobra. It's one of Stallone's best films. Before that, I wouldn't be caught dead trying to eat frozen pizza. I thought it wasn't fit for human consumption, but that film changed my life.
Simon, that has nothing to do with the film. You're just talking about pizza.
With that, we cut back to 2005 and Le Carre playing as York. We'll come back to the present day a few times throughout the game. York begins to look into the murder of Lise Clarkson on his vacation in Le Carre, and with that, we'll hear some familiar music.
You know, I keep thinking about that movie we stopped to see on our way here, Zach. The Island, 2005, directed by Michael Bay. For a movie being shown at a cinema complex, it was surprisingly artistic. An experimental setting mixed with hard-hitting drama. It was art house sci-fi. That director's going to change the history of art house films.
York here does suffer a bit of the Flanderization effect. Flanderization is when a character trait over time becomes their main personality. The best example is the subject of the term, Ned Flanders. Throughout the course of The Simpsons, Flanders' personality became more and more dominated by his religious faith. He became more one-note as a result. In Deadly Premonition 2, York goes overboard with his love of movies. In the first game, he would talk about them with Zach on the regular. He would drop them into conversations with others, but not always. And even then, it was only a brief mention. In Deadly Premonition 2, it seems like in every single conversation, he'll bring up movies. Now, this is York 5 years before the events of the first game. It is possible he learned to tone down on movie talk and conversation. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels very much like Flanderization. Hey, people loved York, right? A key part of his character gets turned up to 11 and drowns out other traits that made him so lovable in the first place.
The most evil monster I've ever seen, in fact.
A monster?
Oh yes. A demon incarnate who plunged New York City into mortal fear. The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Marshmallow?
Ghostbusters, 1984, directed by Ivan Reitman. Now that's a film that was filled to the brim with bona fide horror. A true masterpiece that boasted an honest depiction of just how frightening a real ghost would be. Even if you watched it now, I'm sure it would still chill you to the bone.
That said, it's not like he's lost that lovable, goofy charm about him. It's still there and comes out on the regular. As far as flanderization goes, I've seen far worse. But there are times where York veers into the realm of caricature as opposed to character.
In a certain Missouri town, they built the water tower low enough that a person could easily climb up to it. And that's exactly where a mass murderer decided to hide the bodies of all his victims. The water tower was so low to the ground that he could even climb up to it while carrying a dead body on his back. Incidentally, they ended up finding a total of 43 bodies in there. But the part that truly shocked Zach and I wasn't the number of bodies, Patty.
What?
It was the fact that over the 6 months from the first murder to when the case was solved, that whole time, the townspeople had been drinking the water.
The law enforcement side of Deadly Premonition 2 has a different narrative approach. Some of it works, and some of it misses the mark. In tow with us as our assistant is Patricia Woods. She's the stepdaughter of Melvin Woods, the town sheriff.
I promise to protect you from all the evil in our world. Well, that's stupid. By the way, what's your name?
FBI Special Agent Francis York Morgan. Please, just call me York. That's what everyone calls me.
Is something wrong with you? Adults ain't supposed to act like that. I only asked for your name so I can write it on the contract. You should have been able to figure that out if you're a real FBI agent like you said. Come on, sign here. Right here on the paper.
She can be a bit of a brat at times, but who isn't at her age?
You're really gonna leave a little girl like me here all alone? Act like an adult for once in your life. I promise to protect you from all the evil in our world. You promised! Protect me!
You'll be fine. You made it this far alone, didn't you?
That said, she also shows great maturity. Having a character of her age in a story can lead to disaster, an element that can become insufferable and drag the story down. Deadly Premonition 2 doesn't fall victim to this. How Patricia and York bounce off one another is one of the better character dynamics of Deadly Premonition 2.
Sugar might be dangerous, but it ain't against the law. You got no right to take that from me, even if you are some FBI agent.
Actually, Patty, I do. We signed a contract, remember? I promise to protect you from all the evil in our world.
Hey!
Delicious. What an amazing chocolate sundae. Zach, I think we just uncovered an incredible treasure here. I feel like I could eat one of these every day while we're in this town.
Oh, what?
She serves as a look into the town of Lucare from the perspective of a child. As the story progresses, Patricia becomes a key character in how it unfolds. The dynamic between York and Patricia's stepfather, Sheriff Melvin Woods, isn't as compelling. Unlike George, Melvin more or less rolls over for York and lets him do what he wants without any fuss. George and Emily butting heads with York throughout the first game did wonders for the story. That's missing here. Melvin feels more along for the ride as opposed to working as a unit. York does argue with Patricia, but it's more about the disagreements between an adult and a child. Melvin has the characteristic of coming up with movie trailer blurbs on the regular. It does turn into a one-note element when the game overplays its hand with it. Funny enough, York doesn't do much to play along with it considering his love of films.
A shooting star landed in a rural town, right on top of a man who now has a meteor struck hard. Our world is filled with information, and it's all within their grasp. FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
At our hotel, we'll meet Hungan in one of the paintings. He serves as our oracle throughout Deadly Premonition 2, a benevolent spirit acting like the coffee in the first game, guiding us of where to go next.
You found the flying serpent. But now, the flying serpent will come to find you.
Yeah, that sounds right.
At the hotel, we have David Jawara, the chef, the bellboy, and the concierge, each with a different personality and a way of speaking.
Only amateur chefs flap their gums about stuff that ain't food related.
We work at the same place, yeah. But, I can't really say whether we're good friends with each other. We're all professionals, though. Nothing more, nothing less.
Jolly good, sir. Then allow me to explain. Lucare means square in French.
Ah. And
That's it.
that's it?
Yes, that's it, sir.
Our provider of fast travel is Raven Yahoo. As far as I know, no relation to Wink Yahoo. She gets quite the entrance Tokyo drifting into the scene.
Hey, you! You're FBI, right?
And who might you be?
I'm Raven, but around here they call me the Speed Witch.
Fast travel isn't hidden behind a side quest here. Like the original, we need to visit an area first to unlock fast travel. She's come out with the Uber model a few years before Uber did.
I got a feeling that in the future, cell phones are gonna get more advanced. And people are gonna be able to just order taxis from their phones whenever they need to get somewhere. So I'm thinking, hey, why don't I just start a company that instantly sends out drivers to take folks from point A to point B?
How?
I want to make it so that anyone out there can just register on my site as a driver. I'm talking normal people, not pros. Then once we get a request, we'll just send out the driver who's closest to the customer. It'll be a hell of a lot more convenient than public transportation and faster than any normal taxi company. I'm positive it'll be a big hit.
She's one of the better, more likable characters in Deadly Premonition too. Plus, I like her referring to York as Yorkie.
Please, call me York.
Okay, Yorkie it is.
Running the local diner is Alexis, David's sister. A kind woman with that famous southern hospitality.
Oh, you like my pictures? My hobby's collecting snapshots of what our town used to be like. So whenever someone gives me an old picture, I just put it up here on display. Our world these days feels a bit cold to me, you know? Just thought it'd be nice to help folks remember what it was like in the good old days.
Zach, did you hear that? The good old days. Even in a remote town that's already far behind the times, there are still people who yearn for the past.
There's a bowling lane in the diner. It's always occupied by Mrs. Carpenter. She hasn't let anyone use the lane in the last decade since the death of her husband. She's a very superstitious individual. Her love of bowling shines through. She's shaped her shrubbery like bowling pins. The way she talks reminds me of Bobby Hill at times.
Ooh, you like that? That's what I'm talking about. Who's your mama?
Running the voodoo shop is the mirror.
Doth this be what thou seekest? I could sell it to thee now, and only now. Surely fortune shall not bless thee with another chance.
At the Owl's Nest bar, we have Xavier manning the bar. A jazz musician at night, he's rocking the tighty whities and a cowboy hat. Why? Well, why not?
This is America, land of the free. So folks just do whatever the hell they want. That's one of the beautiful things about America. Yeah.
He loves to say yeah at the end of most sentences, something that becomes very one note and overplayed throughout the game.
Don't give up the good fight. Yeah.
In his band are a couple of other townsfolk. One of them is Pastor Tyrone Sanders. He also serves as the doctor of Lucare. Another is Emma, Sanders' adopted daughter. She's skilled in the art of skateboarding. We could go to her to fix up our board and learn some new tricks. At the swamp is Chuck. With that stature of his, I thought of Pat from Super Best Friends Play. Someone get this guy a nose hair trimmer stat.
Assholes think they can just drive right through my turf, right through my dang crawdad farm.
Tending the graveyard is Lewis the Gravekeeper.
What are you searching for?
Unknown.
You don't know? Interesting. Zach, this man is the perfect symbol of the human race. We all live out our lives searching for things, yet no one knows what they're actually searching for. That's what it means to be human. Don't you agree, Zach?
Working at the warehouse is Avery Smith, a tall, imposing figure, but not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Oh, I help with the research, too. I do like research.
Research? What are you talking about, Avery? This doesn't look like a lab to me.
Oh, ain't no lab. It's a warehouse. Ain't no lab. Smarty pant scientist does the research. I ain't no smarty pants, no.
Running the town is the Clarkson family. They've held a stronghold over the area for the last century. The death of Lise Clarkson, a teenage girl, is the reason we're here. Along the way, we'll run into members of the Clarkson family. I'm going to hold off on going into who they are for now. More of them while going through the game's highlights and plot. Now, I did give more of a passing glance at the characters here than the first game. The reason is that there's far less to the characters here. Most come across as caricatures as opposed to characters. One note in their traits. They come across as wacky for the sake of wacky. Again, a case of looking at the surface level of what made the characters of the first game work. Yes, there was plenty of wackiness in the cast of Deadly Premonition. But when you got to know the characters better, there was more to them. Especially when you did the side quests. They were people first, wacky elements second. Deadly Premonition 2 will replace its hand by putting the wacky elements first. Well, what about the side quests here? Do they flesh out the characters at all? Next to none of that happens in Deadly Premonition 2. A majority of the side quests are time-wasting fetch quests for little reward. There's next to no incentive to do them in Deadly Premonition 2. When going through the characters of Deadly Premonition, I could list them off no problem off the top of my head. For the sequel, I had to double check to make sure I covered everyone. It's so puzzling how mishandled these side quests are here. Through the critical path, we'll learn plenty about Patricia and the Clarksons. There are great bits to discover within. It's such a bummer that the other citizens of Lucare don't get the same love. As a result, the town of Lucare feels less like a town and more of a collection of buildings with NPCs. It lacks the charm of the original. That said, I'll give them credit for taking a risk here with Deadly Premonition 2. Instead of revisiting Greenvale, we're somewhere different with an all-new cast. Despite how much padding Deadly Premonition 2 makes use of, the town of Lucare is less spread out than Greenvale. Instead of a car, York can commute through skateboard. There are no cars for us to drive. And it works fine for what the game's going for. The town's smaller size is fitting for it. There's a quirky factor with York skateboarding around. A bit forced? Sure, but nothing too bad. Of all the game's issues, skateboarding is low on the list. The music track while skateboarding is quite catchy. While the music isn't quite up to par with the first game, it's still well done and memorable. They're fitting for the Louisiana setting. Tracks from the first game will pop up throughout. Even then, they're kept in check. It's less about nudging you on the shoulder and saying, remember this track, but more to enhance key scenes. It doesn't go overboard with them. More pop up during the end stretch, and give great catharsis to what was happening. Talking to Zach while skateboarding has a law of repetition for topics, but I always enjoyed your humming Life is Beautiful. The way Deadly Premonition 2 handles music and conversations differs from the original. Music in the first game would weave in and out through conversations. Tracks could change on the dime, causing a large tonal shift, some to hilarious results. There's little of this in Deadly Premonition 2. Many conversations have no music track at all, or if they do, they stick to one track. Having tracks weave in and out would have done wonders to help capture the magic of the original. One switch to the day-night system is the addition of days of the week. Some quests require a certain time and day to start. While that seems like a small shift, it has a major impact on the game itself, and not in a good way. Hold that thought for now, it's something we'll return to later. Earlier I brought up how Ubisoft padding exists throughout Deadly Premonition 2. Part of that equation includes unnecessary RPG elements and crafting. Hitting a button will allow York to concentrate. This will mark items in the nearby environment on your map. Use them to craft your charms. To the game's credit, they give you many options in how you can customize York's abilities. Thing is, the game isn't difficult and doesn't push you to get better upgrades. They're helpful to cut down the tedium, but that's about it. Throughout Deadly Premonition 2, we'll have stretches in the other world. I didn't mind the first stretch and was curious to see how they would change throughout, but they don't. These sections are some of the worst cases of padding in Deadly Premonition 2. They go on far longer than they need to. They reuse the same interiors. While the original Otherworld sections could drag, at least the environments were different. What's even worse is how much mandatory combat the game throws your way. In the original, they would keep mandatory combat sections in check. Most enemies you could run past. Majority of combat encounters in Deadly Premonition 2 are mandatory to progress. I'm all for having some required combat, but Deadly Premonition 2 goes overboard here. I would roll my eyes when I discovered another Otherworld section as the game progressed. One of the biggest indicators that Deadly Premonition 2 needed more development time. While these sections are fitting with the theme and location for Deadly Premonition 2, they lack the atmosphere of the original. The uneasy atmosphere of the first game's Otherworld sections is nowhere to be found. How does combat handle? Like crap. Like something you find from an early prototype of a game in Unity engine, which Deadly Premonition 2 uses. The game is generous in your aiming, especially with certain upgrades. During the Otherworld sections, York's arm will turn to a cycle gun, allowing for lock-on.
What the? Zach, I don't even need to say it, do I? This is right out of that movie. Videodrome, 1982, directed by David Cronenberg. At the time, it was seen as a hard movie to digest for normal moviegoers, but now it's become a cult classic. I always just saw it as another weird Canadian movie, but this changes everything. My arm and my gun have become one. Now I can really understand what Max was going through.
This can trivialize most encounters, especially boss fights. Like the first game, there was little enemy variety. Whenever these one enemy types would die, I could only hear snarf. They are saying snip. With repetitive, reused environments lacking atmosphere, poor combat controls, most combat sections being mandatory, you get one unpleasant experience. Profiling is different in the sequel. Instead of spreading clues throughout the Otherworld, these investigations take place all in one spot. They're good to see York's thought process and don't grind the game to a halt. That said, I do miss how they would unfold in the original, a blurry image becoming more clear over the course of finding clues. One nice addition is the link board in York's hotel room, a nice visual way of seeing the key players and how everything fits together. Plus, there's no need to put it all together yourself without any consequences. Alan Wake 2, I'm looking your direction. With that, let's dive more into how Deadly Premonition 2 unfolds, so spoilers ahead. Prepare for tedium, although not at first. The game moves at a reasonable pace to begin with. One of the first clues from the Oracle Hungan requires York to do some bowling.
Fell 10 maidens in the shrine of hunger. Find the flying serpent in the ambiguous zero. Dance with the flying serpent, and you will glimpse the other world.
10 maidens and an ambiguous zero. Got it.
To free the lane up from Mrs. Carpenter, we put an item out in front of her house. Being very superstitious, that throws her off her game, no pun intended. All things considered, she seems pretty cool with York taking her lane when she returns to bowl.
Oh, looks like I finally earned myself a rival.
That was just a stroke of luck, Mrs. Carpenter. Despite how I may seem, I've never been any good at any of the ball-based sports that exist here on our planet.
Oh, no, you can't fool me. I can tell the FBI's giving you very special training.
We'll run into Galena Clarkson, the mother of Lise Clarkson, during the stretch.
Whoa.
That was close.
Well, look at you, all standing there like you're expecting me to apologize. It's your fault for not paying attention.
We'll learn more about Patricia's mother and Melvin's wife, Candy Woods. She remains an unseen presence for most of the game. Melvin tells York that she's sick. During an investigation of the last location of Lisa's body, York comes to the conclusion that the one moving her must have been a giant. Far more than Avery Smith is, a good 10 feet. Galena has gone missing. Before our first Otherworld section, we'll meet her husband and Lisa's father, Danny Clarkson. He married into the family. Nice haircut as well.
Zach and I are following oracles given to us by a skeletal gentleman. If you wish to find the person who killed your daughter, you should cooperate. I imagine that not even the Clarksons want to start a feud with a federal power.
I've had enough of your bullshit. Why's everyone and their mother been pissing in my ear today, huh?
At the end of the Otherworld section, we'll get an answer to who killed Lise Clarkson. It was her mother, Galena. Lise was under the influence of a drug named Sang Rouge.
More. I want more.
Okay, sweetie, we're gonna play a fun game now.
I love games. I want to play.
Why?
While Who Killed Lise gets an early reveal, it's the why that needs solving. Why is there this tall, stylish woman watching this murder unfold? What part do they play? We'll have a boss fight with Galena. She mentions completing the first ritual for the Red One's plan. Her boss form here is quite out there, but it's not like George's final form wasn't in the first game. We arrest Galena, who makes mention of Professor R, the tall, stylish woman. The end of this episode introduces us to the head of the Clarkson family, PJ Clarkson. He's an imposing figure, both literal and figurative.
It's nearly been a century since the Clarksons first took control of Lucari. 100 years. I always thought my legacy would live on for 300 at least.
He gets his son-in-law Danny to prove his worth to the Clarkson family. Danny pays a heavy price.
Just one arm. Slide it on through that wire there, and it'll take care of it for you.
Paul, I mean, you're joking, right?
Daniel, have I ever told you a single joke?
No, but...
If you want to become a real Clarkson, then you done got yourself a job to do.
Wait, Paul, I get it now. You want me to stick it in and then pull it out at the last minute, right? You want to see if I got guts or not, but there's gonna be another way. You can't be serious, sir. Hey, knock it off, you assholes! Let me go! He's just joking with me. Let me go, goddammit! Oh, please, sir, don't do this! Just tell me this is a joke, please!
And then this episode ends with a nice jazz interlude. So far, the game's moved at a reasonable pace. You're free to wander town to meet some of the other townsfolk. The pieces are unfolding at a reasonable rate. While Who Killed Lise Clarkson gets an early answer, there's still many unanswered questions. It sets a solid foundation. Too bad the game stumbles moving forward. We cut back to the present day with Zach, Simon, and Aaliyah. Plenty of information gets repeated with what we've seen in the York sections. They could have chopped these sections down a good amount, as much as a quarter of their length. We discover that Patricia Clarkson has a stalker. She's been gone the last few days. There's evidence that Zach has been going to Lucari, but he remains tight-lipped. Why is Patricia now a Clarkson? Did she marry into the family? She's been evasive so far with York about her family.
You're brimming with potential. Don't you think she's the perfect partner for our last dance? What do you say, my fairy? Don't you agree? She's good. So good.
Back in 2005, we discover Galena killed in her cell. York comes face to face with PJ Clarkson in a game highlight. We get more insight into the Clarkson family. PJ had 3 children, one being Galena, a son, and another daughter. This scene is a great example of how the game loses some of that first game magic without shifting music tracks. The theme of PJ here is great, an imposing track to emphasize he means business.
Now, whether you end up being an angel or a demon, I reckon you're the man I've been waiting for all this time. Once you finish that autopsy, and we're clear to take her home.
After he leaves, York has a great moment in reflecting on this encounter, a stark tonal shift. That said, it's done to no backing track.
They're phenomenal, Patty. So perfectly rural. Ominous statements, foul-mouthed insults. This town possesses a complicated system of communication that you just can't find in the city. Work-centric emails are so cold and lifeless. This is what true human connections feel like.
This could have been so much better if another track popped up. We're off to go see Chuck in the southern part of town. He was the one who discovered Lisa's body. But York's skateboard and skateboarding skills aren't up to task. We'll need to take the board to Emma Sanders to fix it up, which can be a long walk if you haven't gone around town unlocking fast travel shortcuts. In the church, York will run to the stylish tall woman, Professor R.
Oh, excuse me.
This is Lucare. You need to watch where you're going, or someone might end up tripping you.
Zach, it's her. The stylish woman who watched Lise die.
And this is where Deadly Premonition 2 enters its momentum-killing stretch. A stretch of fetch quests that kills the game dead in the water. 3 simple words.
The Lord hungers!
This is where the day-night cycle rears its ugly head. There's one item required for this quest that we can only collect on a certain day.
Alexis, could I have some red beans and rice?
Oh my lord. Sorry, honey, but no can do. We only serve red beans and rice on Mondays. That's a meal you eat when you're busy, like folks usually are on Monday.
I ended up having a stretch of sleeping through the day so I could get this item. To say this killed the pacing the game had is an understatement. And then after that, Pastor Sanders makes us do another fetch quest.
You see, my dear lost lamb, our Lord still hungers. 1 anaconda skin, 1 squirrel tail, and 1 pressed white guara. This is what you must bring next.
Are you kidding me?
At least this phase has items nearby and don't rely on time constraints. And to be honest, at this point I just looked up a guide to save myself even more time of where to find them. The game gives some meta commentary here on the nature of fetch quests.
Now I get it, Zach. This is nothing but a shameless fetch quest.
I'm surprised that some YouTuber with too high of a word count hasn't done a video essay talking about how this meta commentary is brilliant. It's not. While Deadly Premonition 2 has terrible padding, this section by far is the worst. All that intrigue that built up until now goes on hold for a decent stretch. If someone were to mod this out of the game, I would like to shake that person's hand. Putting this awful quest behind us, we're on the trail of Lena Doman, or Professor R. York found Lena's prescription for female hormone medication. We'll get one of the game's key scenes where York talks with Lena.
But I know of a drug with a red color that certainly doesn't signify life. It sometimes even steals the lives of those who drown themselves in it. Catch my drift?
Before a candle's flame burns out, it burns brighter than ever before, blazing like a shining red star. Don't you think that instant is more valuable than a century of smoldering?
Lena is trans. Before transitioning, Lena was Lenny Clarkson, the son of PJ Clarkson. Lena is seeking revenge on the Clarkson family and the one making Sang Rouge, a deadly drug that's been spreading throughout the area. This scene received tweaking in an early game patch due to some backlash. In the original version, York referred to Lena as Lenny. Not what you would call politically correct, but did clear up any ambiguity of who Lena used to be. Before encountering Lena in the bar, York gives a whole "at the end of the day, it's your quality of character that counts" speech. From what we know about Lena so far, dealing out Sang Rouge doesn't paint in the best of pictures. And there's more of that to come with future revelations.
Person's birthplace, nature, race, and physical features have no bearing on their value as a human being. We're always free, and we should respect each other just the way we are. So you shouldn't feel a need to hate Lena for no reason. No matter what the people around you say, you can't let them control you. Sometimes things like common sense and decency can end up deeply hurting other people. I sincerely hope you don't forget that.
Okay, I won't.
But if Lena's committed a crime, that's a different story altogether. She may be a social minority, but she's still free and capable of knowing the difference between right and wrong.
Drugged by Lena at the bar, York heads to the Clarkson estate upon awakening. What follows is another momentum-killing stretch. At the Clarkson estate, we'll have more Otherworld sections. These drag on and on with many mandatory combat encounters. As mentioned earlier, the interiors here are the same as before, although there's a bit more variety with a new enemy type. Not that there's much to say about them. Between these Otherworld sections and the Clarkson estate, we'll get profiling sections. There are several key plot revelations during these stretches. The game breaks up these 3 profiling sections with Otherworld stretches between them. If it was only one Otherworld stretch, and these profiling sections were back to back, this section would have flown so much better. Lena has come to kill PJ. PJ talks about how the Clarkson family is on its dying breaths. Lena has planted a bomb. Lena's mentioned that they're not here to end the Clarkson bloodline, but to purify it. Clarkson bloodline is cursed and needs purging. There's mention of a goddess of fertility.
You're going to shoot me. Okay. Go ahead and shoot. Come on! Shoot me! The Clarkson bloodline is cursed. It needs purification. A blood purge.
Like Lena, we'll have another trivial boss fight with Lena in a similar form. Back to the real world, PJ in his dying breaths reveals a horrifying truth about Lena and the eldest Clarkson daughter.
I also know that you had any cause with your older sister. Your own flesh and blood.
Shut up!
I just didn't know how to treat you. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
Before setting off the bomb, Lena reveals who the goddess of fertility is.
Patricia Clarkson.
And with that, PJ and Lena are gone from the story. Well, for the most part. Their actions and consequences shape the plot moving forward. Them dying off at this point in the story surprised me. There was plenty more mileage they could have got out of these two characters. This section is a great example of the choppy pacing of Deadly Premonition 2. The story grinds to a halt with the padding of fetch quests. Then the plot sprints to the finish line. Felt like we were only really getting started with PJ and Lena. Patricia tells us that her stepfather Melvin and mother Candy are missing. After reviewing the case board, this episode ends with a shot of a woman who puts Amberlynn Reed to shame. We have another section back in the present day that, again, repeats most of the information we saw in 2005. But there is an interesting mention of an anonymous tip.
A postcard with a dragonfly on it, a wrapped sample of Sang Rouge, and a note.
What did it say?
Investigate the Clarksons. F.K.
Do you remember what the coffee said? Forrest Kaysen. F.K.
Looking in Zach's bedroom, there's another big reveal here of what Zach is up to. So many questions here. The section ends with Zach sneaking up on Aaliyah. How is he able to do so in such a state?
Where's Patricia?
That's our altar. What are you doing?
Back in 2005, Hungan gives us the next clues in progressing forward.
You're more fun than I thought. Here's the oracle you ask for. Listen with your heart. Speak to the 17 comrades who saw the birth of New Orleans.
I wish Deadly Premonition 2 had a better flow between investigations. While the coffee would guide us in the original, there were several points where the investigation would flow from one clue or suspect to another. A lot of the time in Deadly Premonition 2, it feels like York is waiting for Hungan to guide us of where to go next. Can you guess what time it is? Even more padding fun. We have a stretch in which we follow Dalmatian, who looks a lot like Willie from the first game. We follow him around Lucare, going from the south to the very north. Compare this section in the original where Emily followed Willie. We had some wacky music playing. We cut back and forth between Emily and a captured York. Emily would stop to chat with Forrest at points. Here, there's no change in music. York will talk with Patricia at key points, but the stretches between are long. Well, it does give you a chance to pick up crafting items along the way. During this stretch, I start to think of the many ways I could better spend my time. The end reveal of the red tree is a great scene, but my goodness, did the game take its time in getting us here. On par, of course, for Deadly Premonition 2.
It looks like a tree that you could find anywhere, yet it's also unlike any other, completely alien. And look how it's weaved its way into the landscape. Almost like cancer cells invading a human body. You might not even notice it unless you're focused on finding it. And this feeling,
As I gaze upon this tree, I can feel evil emotions rising out from within me. Why on earth did that Southern general bring this tree into this town? I promise to protect you from all the evil in our world. Do not touch this tree. Got that, Patty?
Got it, Agent York.
We'll come across Danny Clarkson, drunk. This poor man has gone through so much. He's seen so much death in his family.
You came here to destroy the Clarksons. You destroyed them. Satan.
Satan? Not quite, Daniel. I'm just an agent carrying out a mission in accordance with federal law. On the contrary, I came to put a stop to all these problems. You might even consider thanking me for it.
Then we have a bit where Patricia knows where to go next, according to Hungan's riddles. Instead of saying, "Hey York, let's go to the bridge," she leads us there. Why? Because we need even more padding. Nothing interesting happens along the way. We have a stretch in the other world in the outdoors of Lucare. I had a funny little dialogue exchange with Patricia here. Guess the game didn't account for this.
It's a beautiful day, Patty.
Really? Seems kinda normal to me.
Now that you mention it, yes, it is a normal day. I just felt like saying that.
What? You know, sometimes you really get on my nerves.
We'll come across Lena's lab and get further answers to what's going on. Putting two and two together, you could take a good guess of who the daughter of incest is.
It says that when Lena was still known as Lenny, she once fell in love with a woman. She fell in love with her older sister. That matches up with what PJ mentioned just before he died. And apparently, they had a daughter. The Clarksons' family tree is far more complicated than I could have imagined.
You can say that again.
And here it says that the Clarksons' older daughter later fell in love with someone in town and got married. Then she must still be somewhere in this town. Hey, Patty, did you know about all this?
I don't know.
And then we get a nonchalant reveal of who influenced Lena's actions. That nefarious sapling salesman, Forrest Kaysen.
A salesman passing through town gave me an epiphany that changed my life. She didn't create San Rouge until after she met this person. And from that point onward, she started fanatically worshiping someone. She also ceases to mention anything more about her older sister. And the word goddess of fertility starts appeering everywhere.
In the case of cutscene incompetence, York gets knocked out. When he awakens, Patricia's gone. All things considered, he seems pretty relaxed about her being gone. Like a minor inconvenience. Hungan appears in York's coffee to guide him of where to find Patricia. We get another great scene of Danny coming to deal with what's happened around him. His arc is one of the better ones to play out in Deadly Premonition 2. A glimpse of what made the original so memorable. He feels like a character instead of a caricature.
I reckon I owe you an apology for how I was acting before. I think I get what you meant now. You'll no longer be able to borrow a certain someone's power. Well, those words woke me up. I need to get myself together or I'll sink. You saved me. So, thanks.
Now this is a surprise, Zach. Can a human being really turn themselves around this quickly?
We'll come face to face with Melvin, Patricia, and the fat lady we saw earlier at a boathouse. This is Candy Woods, Mother Patricia, Melvin's wife, and eldest daughter of PJ. She's been under the influence of San Rouge for some time, hence the wait. Melvin wants to be the one to rebuild the Clarkson legacy in the name of Lena by purging the bloodline.
Now that Candy's become the goddess, I will take her once more and claim my seat as the king who rules this town. Yes, I will be the one who rebuilds the Clarksons' legacy!
While this is a great scene, having PJ and Lena around could have added so much more weight to it. To see them present with Melvin, Candy, and Patricia, too bad the game killed them off earlier. The boathouse ends up in flames with Candy and Melvin meeting their end. Melvin does have a nice send-off, coming to realize his mistake.
The worst father, graced with the sweetest daughter. Life can be a bitch sometimes. But it wasn't all bad.
This episode ends with the mention of Hurricane Katrina, convening a way to sweep away a lot of evidence. While most of the case is now wrapped up, Lisa's body remains missing until 2018.
Katrina brought that rain to us. And now, I realize that at the very end, I saw him.
Now we're in the end stretch, and while there's still some annoying padding, there are some great moments ahead. Some that capture the magic of the original. It's too bad that the game makes it such a struggle to get there. Zack has a reunion with an old, familiar face.
Oh, howdy, Zack. So we meet again. Such a touching reunion. Like a little boy who was given up for adoption, finally reuniting with his true parents. Look, even little Willie here is beside himself with joy.
Casey!
Oh dear.
Then we have another long stretch of looking around Zack's room as Aaliyah. While there's a lot of repetition, there's a lot of insight into what's happened in Lucari since then. Patricia now controls the Clarkson Empire. Danny Clarkson raised her after the incident. You know, if the game took time to put in some side quests to flesh out Lucari, these sections could have been much shorter. Give insight into the Clarksons throughout the game and the citizens of Lucari. Instead, we have a long current day stretch full of repeating information and fluff, with stretches of dialogue going over an hour, to the point even some like Kojima would be thinking, let's cut this back. For the first time since Lucari, Zack can see Hungon, who gets the ball rolling on where to go next.
The contract, once signed, will last for eternity. But only in the presence of true love. Did you hear that? Good.
Zack can now see the other world again, something he lost after Greenvale. It was the reason for his sick leave and taking a desk job. It seems that at death's door, he can now see the other world again. During this bit, we can now see the fairy floating around that Zack kept mentioning. Avery Smith, the gentle giant, kidnapped Patricia. He had an obsession with Lise Clarkson. Patricia and Lise bear a strong resemblance to one another. Both Avery and York during the story have a moment of confusion between the two.
Lise.
Hey, cut it out!
Lise. Why?
Avery, that's not Lise.
Hey! Hey, Agent York.
You're Lise Clarkson.
Calling a favor from a higher-up at the FBI, Zack takes a private jet back to Lucari to rescue Patricia from Avery. Finding that Zack still has these same items in his inventory after all these years. And of course, the game gets in its own way once again. After all that momentum, here comes more Otherworld sections. Once again, uses the same interiors prior instead of the warehouse interior. Avery was the 10-foot giant that York theorized back in 2005. The red seeds can enhance anyone's unique characteristics. When the FBI took Lisa's frozen body away, Avery kidnapped Patricia in her place. Avery keeps her trapped on an altar. With that, we get Avery's true form, a giant child. I can't help but feel bad for Avery. Lena manipulated him into continuing with Sang Rouge. With Avery taken care of, Zack goes to free Patricia. It seems that Zack's time is about to expire. He begins to hallucinate Patricia berating him, and she brings up a name from Zack's past that crushes him to the core.
You should have just let me die, just like you did with all the others. You let them all die.
Stop. Stop it.
No, I won't. You built up such a towering mountain of corpses.
No.
Yes, you did. You're possessed by death.
No, I'm not. I did it for the sake of justice.
Is that why you let her die? For the sake of justice?
Don't say it. Please. Whatever you do, just don't say her name.
Emily Wyatt.
No!
Emily Wyatt.
Zack is at wit's end. At his lowest moment, in comes Forrest to offer Zack a hand, like the devil himself. A choice the game gives us, and the only choice available.
Oh, don't give me that look, Zack. I'm awful sorry I'm not York. But I can still save you. I could even take you over to the other side, if that's what you really want. Come on, give me your hand, old buddy. I'll lead you to where you need to go. Just like a lighthouse that guides ships through the dark, abyssal night.
Zack succumbs to the red tree and turns into a monstrosity. Aaliyah comes in and shoots Zack in his monstrous form. At this point, Zack seems to be on his dying breaths. Patricia brings up the contract they made all those years ago. Seems like Zack is going to sacrifice himself to save Patricia. But that's not what happens. Instead, what happened took me by surprise, but one that's so obvious in hindsight.
It can't be. Is this a miracle? Oh, God. I don't even know what to say. You've become quite the crybaby since I last saw you, Zack. Hi there. Good to see you again, Patty.
Who are you?
FBI Special Agent Francis York Morgan. Please, call me York. That's what everyone calls me.
Agent York? You're with the FBI? Just like Zack?
Yes, that's right. I'm Zack, and Zack is me.
Like the original, Zack was always the main personality, something that wasn't revealed until the end. Patricia is quote-unquote meeting York for the first time here. It was always Zack back then. When the old music from Deadly Premonition kicked in, a big stupid grin appeared across my face. What a fantastic moment. We had to wade our way through excessive levels of padding, but we made it. We have our final fight against Forrest, who has possessed Aaliyah. There's something so funny here with FK floating around here flapping his arms. Because of course he would.
Checkmate, Morgan.
It seems like this time, Forrest is gone for good.
Oh my power!
Now it looks like Zack is finally succumbing to his illness, but that's not the case. And here, another old track appears from the first game for the first time. York says his farewell to Zack. It's a great scene, and using this old returning music track makes it that much sweeter.
This contract isn't valid anymore. Now, I'm going to protect you from all the evil in the world, and I plan on keeping my promise. So you're not allowed to die before I do. Go on, sign the contract. Come on, sign it. Now!
Are you sure you're prepared for everything that entails? You can only break the rules once. Listen to me, Patricia. When Zach wakes up, I want you to tell him something. This is our final farewell. Thank you so much for all you've done. Over all those years, you never forgot about me, did you? It's been so long since we've seen each other, but I know you always kept me in your heart. That's what kept me alive. I owe it all to you, Zach. Thank you. And goodbye.
We get a Zach voiceover what happens afterwards. Avery gets a long prison sentence. Aaliyah joins the Sang Rouge task force. In a bit of a bummer, Simon Jones ends up putzing around the office afterwards. While he could be a goofball, he did show his signs of brilliance. At various points, he had a better understanding of what was going on than Aaliyah. Too bad to see some of those talents go to waste. A post-credit scene has a video call between Patricia and Zach. He's still alive. Patricia, despite all she's been through, isn't giving up. She's determined to overcome this cursed bloodline of hers. The future for Lucare and the Clarksons look bright with her in charge.
Oh, I got it. I want to go and get one of Alexis's chocolate sundaes.
Not a bad idea. They are to die for.
Yeah, they're like the Deadly Premonition of ice cream.
So I guess in relation to the events of the director's cut, I guess this could still play out, where Zach could get married and have grandchildren. I guess it is still possible after the events of Deadly Premonition 2. Was his illness gone for good? My headcanon is that Patricia found him a nice woman from Lucare to marry. Zach is messaging with York here. The fairy of Emily that we saw earlier has returned. The end shot is of Hoongan bowling. Who was Hoongan? Why was he helping us? Could he have been Mrs. Carpenter's late husband? That ends Deadly Premonition 2. It's a fantastic ending in how many things come together. But as I've said throughout this video, the game throws so much padding and bullshit your way. You have these long dialogue stretches during the present day with plenty of repeating information. Much of what we've already seen during the 2005 Lucare sections. While the first game did have long dialogue stretches, I never felt the need of wanting to skip through them. When these present day sections stayed focused on new information, they could be great. That said, there were so many stretches I was ready to return to gameplay, which as noted can be insufferable at points with its usage of padding and fetch quests. A game that loves to waste your time, one that puts many modern games to shame on that front. As a result, you have a choppy narrative, one where the pacing is all over the place. The game moves at a reasonable pace at first, before grinding to a halt with pointless fetch quests. Then the story rushes to the finish line. Before we know it, key characters like Lena and PJ are gone from the story. Had the game given time to let things breathe, the narrative could have worked so much better. Because there are flashes of greatness throughout, especially during the end stretch. Had they cut back on the excess fat of fetch quests and present day sections, this could have worked. Focus on the side quests to flesh out the characters of Lucare. Give the player more time to learn about them. Turn that one note into a melody. Same for the Clarksons. Danny and Patricia got the screen time needed for their arcs. The other Clarksons come and go like a stranger in the night. Before we know it, they're gone from the story. It's at points where if this was going to be the case, why not make it a visual novel instead? While the gameplay wasn't that noteworthy in the original, here it comes across as lazy. Part of me wonders how much they thought they could get away with by coasting on the reputation of the original. Now, making a follow-up to a game like Deadly Premonition is no easy task. There are parts where it does feel worthy in its follow-up. Yet in most parts it leans into the surface level elements of what made Deadly Premonition so great. Not only that, I have to wonder how working on The Good Life at the same time as Deadly Premonition 2 had an impact. I can't help but think there was a loss of focus on Deadly Premonition 2. Swery and his team aren't a one-trick pony. As mentioned many times throughout this video, there's a method to the madness of Deadly Premonition. While I haven't played it, D4, Dark Dreams Don't Die has a strong following. Deadly Premonition was very much a game that didn't need a sequel. Yet by some miracle, its growing reputation and rabid fanbase made one happen. Would the series have been better off without it? There are signs throughout Deadly Premonition 2 of it being a worthy follow-up, but so much gets in the game's way that it makes it hard to justify, which in a way is somewhat fitting for it as a sequel. And that makes it such a fascinating series. A game that could have come and gone into the bargain bins without much fuss. but there's something about it that all comes together in a wonderful package. One that's been so memorable for a devoted fanbase. Something that was lightning in a bottle. And while they made an effort to replicate that with the sequel, most of that magic wasn't there. Deadly Premonition had the right team and ideas come together into something that shouldn't have worked as well as it does. And wrapping up the script, I have a hard time putting in concise words why Deadly Premonition is so great. Instead, I made a long video, at least for my standards, on why that's the case. I hope this has been a nice trip down memory lane for you, or if you haven't explored the series, a peek into why it's so beloved. For those who haven't played the sequel, and I don't blame you, I hope it gives you a peek into why it falls short, even with the moments of brilliance. And most of all, I'm hoping you could see Deadly Premonition as something more than being the best worst game or so bad it's good. That does Deadly Premonition a disservice for what it can offer you. Yes, there are plenty of bizarre moments and design decisions, but so much more than that. An off-kilter labor of love. A title that faced cancellation a handful of times became something so much more. Oh, and the sequel. Thanks for watching.